Download this code from codegive.com, link in the description below. Common problems with Nuxt client-only components, a deep dive. Nuxt.js excels at server-side rendering, SSR, delivering initial HTML that's SEO-friendly and fast to load. However, sometimes you need components that only run in the browser, client-side. This is where the client-only component comes into play. But using it effectively and avoiding common pitfalls requires understanding its behavior and the Nuxt lifecycle. This tutorial will explore common issues encountered when using client-only and provide solutions with code examples. We'll cover 1. Understanding client-only and its purpose. 2. Problem 1, hydration mismatch. 3. Problem 2, race conditions, data fetching, third-party libraries. 4. Problem 3, incorrect usage, incorrect placement, logic inside. 5. Problem 4, SEO implications. 6. Problem 5, server-side errors, trying to access window, document. 7. Alternative solutions, when client-only is not the best approach. 8. Best practices and tips. 1. Understanding client-only and its purpose. The client-only component in Nuxt tells the server to skip rendering its contents during the initial SSR pass. Instead, its content will only be rendered after the page is loaded in the browser, client-side. This is useful for components that rely on browser APIs. Think components using window, document, local storage, or third-party libraries like chart.js, Google Maps, or video.js that require a browser environment. Improving initial load performance. Offloading heavy, non-critical client-side logic can improve the time to first byte, TTFB, and perceived performance. Avoiding SSR issues. Some libraries or components simply don't play well with server-side rendering and can throw errors. Basic usage. In this example, my client-side component will only be rendered in the browser. The server will skip it during SSR. 2. Problem 1, hydration mismatch. Hydration is the process where Vue takes the static HTML rendered by the server and makes it interactive in the browser. A hydration mismatch occurs when the HTML rendered by the server differs from the HTML generated by the client-side JavaScript. This is a critical problem, as it can lead to inconsistent behavior, broken functionality, and performance degradation. Why it happens with client-only data inconsistencies. If the server-side code and client-side code rely on different data sources or have different logic for data transformation, the initial HTML from the server might be different from what the client generates when my client-side component is rendered. Inconsistent conditional rendering. If conditional rendering logic relies on browser-specific information before the component is mounted on the client, the server might render one branch of the vif or vshow, while the client renders a different one. Differing default values. When dealing with props or reactive data, the server's default value might differ from the client's default, especially if the client's default relies on browser-specific info. Example. Explanation. 1. The server-side renders an empty p-user agent, /p because user agent is an empty string initially. 2. On the client, my client-side component is mounted and this .user agent is populated with the actual user agent string. 3. Hydration mismatch. The client now has different HTML than what the server initially rendered, leading to a potential mismatch. Vue might try to reconcile the difference, causing performance issues and potentially inconsistent behavior. Solutions. Consistent data. Ensure that any data used to render the component is the same on both the server and client, if possible. This often involves careful management of API calls or state management. Avoid relying on browser-specific information during SSR. Move all logic that depends on window, document, or other browser APIs into the mounted hook or a custom lifecycle hook that only runs on the client. Use vcloak to hide initial rendering. Add vcloak to the element whose rendering might differ between server and client. This will hide the element until Vue has finished hydrating it. You'll also need to add CSS to hide elements with the vcloak attribute. Render a placeholder during SSR. Instead of rendering potentially mismatched content, render a placeholder during SSR and then replace it with the actual content on the client. Key takeaway: the key to avoiding hydration mismatches is to minimize the differences between the HTML rendered by the server and the HTML generated by the client-side code. 3. Problem 2, Race conditions, data fetching, third-party libraries. Race conditions occur when the order in which operations are executed becomes unpredictable and affects the result. With client only, this can be problematic because the server doesn't render the component, and the client-side execution might not happen in the order you expect. Scenarios ***. Data fetching ***. Imagine a component that needs to fetch data from an API before rendering. If the data fetch is slow, the component might render with default values or an empty state before the data arrives, leading to unexpected behavior. Third-party library initialization ***. Some libraries need to be initialized after the DOM is ready. If the client-only component relies on such a library, you need to ensure the library is initialized after the component is mounted. Example, data fetching. Problem ***. The component initially renders loading, because the data is null. Then, mounted is called, and the fetch request is initiated. While the request is in flight, the user sees loading. If the API call is slow, the user will see loading for a while. While there isn't a real hydration mismatch, it affects the user experience and can be confusing if the data is expected to be there quickly. Solutions ***. Use asynchronous components with suspense ***. Nuxt 3 and Vue 3 provide excellent support for asynchronous components and suspense. This allows you to render a placeholder while the component is loading. Explanation ***. 1. We use define async component to load my client-side component asynchronously. 2. We wrap client only and my client-side component with suspense. 3. The default slot renders when my client-side component is ready. 4. The fallback slot renders while my client-side component is loading, providing a placeholder like loading my component. Ensure libraries are initialized after the component is mounted. Use the mounted hook to initialize third-party libraries. Check if the DOM element you need to interact with is available before initializing the library. Key takeaway ***. Be aware of the potential for race conditions when using client only, especially with data fetching and third-party libraries. Use asynchronous components with suspense and ensure libraries are initialized only after the DOM is ready. 4. Problem 3, Incorrect usage, incorrect placement, logic inside. The client-only component is a structural element. It determines which parts of the component tree are rendered on the server and which are rendered on the client. Misusing its placement or putting incorrect logic inside it can lead to unexpected behavior and errors. Common mistakes ***. Wrapping too much or too little ***. You want to wrap only the parts that need to be client-side. Wrapping the entire page inside client only defeats the purpose of Nuxt's SSR and SEO benefits. Conversely, not wrapping enough might leave browser-specific logic running on the server, causing errors. Asterisk putting logic that should be in the parent component inside the client-only component. Asterisk this can lead to data flow problems and make your code harder to maintain. Asterisk trying to use client-only as a conditional rendering mechanism. Asterisk it's not designed for dynamically showing or hiding content based on client-side conditions. Use vif, vshow, or other conditional rendering techniques for that. Example, incorrect placement. Problem asterisk. This example effectively disables server-side rendering for the entire page. Other component might not need to be client-side only and could be rendered on the server for better SEO and performance. Corrected example asterisk. Example, incorrect logic placement. Problem asterisk. The handle click method is defined in the parent component but is only accessible after the client-only section is rendered. This makes the code less readable and maintainable. If handle click affects other parts of the page rendered server-side, it might lead to inconsistencies. Corrected example asterisk. While this example is simple and works fine, the point is to consider where the logic should reside. If the logic is related to or modifies anything outside the component inside client only, it's likely better placed in the parent. Key takeaway asterisk use client only strategically, wrapping only the necessary components. Avoid placing logic that belongs in the parent component inside the client only component. Don't use it for conditional rendering, use vif or vshow instead. 5. Problem 4, SEO implications. Because client-only components aren't rendered on the server, their content isn't included in the initial HTML. This has significant SEO implications. Search engine crawlers primarily rely on the initial HTML to understand the page's content. Content rendered only on the client might not be indexed correctly or at all. Example asterisk. Problem asterisk. The crucial key selling point is only rendered on the client. Search engines might not see it, negatively impacting the page's ranking for relevant keywords. Solutions asterisk. Asterisk move important content outside client only asterisk if the content is critical for SEO, try to render it on the server. If it depends on client-side data, consider fetching the data on the server as well, if possible, and passing it to the component. Asterisk use a placeholder with meaningful content asterisk render a placeholder on the server that provides some context about the client-side content. This gives search engines something to index. Asterisk consider using pre-rendering or static site generation, SSG pre-rendering, using nuxt generate, renders the application at build time, generating static HTML files. This includes the content of client-only components after they have been rendered on the client during the build process. SSG is a great solution if your data is known at build time or rarely changes. Asterisk use dynamic rendering, with caution. Dynamic rendering involves serving different content to users and search engine crawlers. This can be achieved by detecting the user agent and serving the full client rendered content to search engines. However, this technique can be considered cloaking by some search engines and can lead to penalties if not implemented carefully. Use it sparingly and ethically. Key takeaway asterisk be mindful of the SEO implications of using client only. Prioritize rendering important content on the server, use placeholders, consider SSG, or use dynamic rendering with caution. 6. Problem 5, server-side errors, trying to access window, document. The most common error when working with Nuxt and SSR is trying to access browser-specific APIs like window, document, local storage, or navigator on the server. These objects don't exist on the server. Example asterisk. Problem asterisk. When the server tries to render this component, it will encounter an error because window is not defined. Nuxt will likely crash during the SSR process. Solutions asterisk. Asterisk wrap the component with client-only asterisk. This is the simplest solution if the entire component relies on browser APIs. Asterisk use conditional checks asterisk. If only part of the component relies on browser APIs, use conditional checks to prevent the code from running on the server. You can check if process.server is true to determine if you're on the server. Asterisk use the onMounted hook in composition API asterisk. In the composition API, use onMounted which only runs on the client. Key takeaway asterisk. Always be mindful of where your code is running, server or client. Avoid accessing browser APIs directly in the data property or created hook. Use client-only, conditional checks, or the onMounted hook to prevent server-side errors. 7. Alternative solutions, when client-only is not the best approach. While client-only is a powerful tool, it's not always the optimal solution. Consider these alternatives. Asterisk conditional rendering, with placeholders. If you need to display something meaningful even when JavaScript is disabled, use conditional rendering with server-side placeholders. This ensures a better user experience and improved SEO. Asterisk asynchronous components with suspense asterisk. As discussed earlier, this is excellent for handling components that rely on data fetching. Asterisk static site generation, SSG. If your data is static or changes infrequently, SSG can pre-render your entire application at build time, including the content of components that would otherwise be client-side only. Asterisk progressive enhancement asterisk. Design your application to work with basic HTML and CSS first, and then enhance it with JavaScript. This provides a good experience for users with JavaScript disabled and improves SEO. 8. Best practices and tips. Asterisk document your client-only usage asterisk. Clearly comment why a component is wrapped in client-only. This helps other developers, and your future self, understand the reasoning behind the decision. Asterisk keep components small and focused asterisk. Smaller components are easier to reason about and debug. Asterisk test in different environments asterisk. Test your application with JavaScript enabled and disabled to ensure it works as expected. Asterisk profile your application asterisk. Use browser developer tools to profile your application's performance and identify areas for optimization. Asterisk stay updated with Nuxt versions asterisk. Newer versions of Nuxt often include performance improvements and new features that can help you avoid common problems. Asterisk understand the Nuxt lifecycle asterisk. A solid understanding of the Nuxt lifecycle, example created, mounted, before destroy, is crucial for building robust applications. In summary asterisk. The client-only component is an essential tool in the nuxt.js ecosystem. By understanding its behavior, potential pitfalls, and alternative solutions, you can use it effectively to build performant, SEO-friendly applications. Pay close attention to hydration mismatches, race conditions, SEO implications, and server-side errors, and remember to document your code clearly. By following these guidelines, you'll be well equipped to tackle the challenges of client-side rendering in a Nuxt environment. Remember that the best approach depends on your specific use case and the needs of your application. Always prioritize performance, SEO, and user experience when making decisions about client-side rendering.